everyone, I'm Professor Casey, and this is quick review number 6 for EGR 112. We'll be talking about string functions. I'm going to be going over some of the basic string functions that we see all the time and that I think are probably the most useful for this class. They include string cat. We'll also talk about string ncat, that's concatenate, string length, string compare, and string copy. And some of these take one input, some of these take two inputs, and some, which we'll see in the example when you have the n in the middle, actually take 3 inputs. So just a quick review, string cat means string concatenate. Concatenate means you're adding one string to the end of the other. So in this case, we're actually adding string 2 to the end of string 1. String length, that just means string length, right? We're checking to see how long a certain string is. This only takes one input. String compare. String compare checks to see every single character in the strings, adds them up mathematically, and then compares the two mathematical integers. If there are 0 differences between string 1 and string 2, you will get 0, right? If one is a higher mathematical number, it just returns a difference. So if one is higher mathematically, right, with alphanumeric characters like the ASCII table, then it will return the difference. So if you get any number but 0, those strings are not the same. And lastly, we'll do string copy. We'll look at string copy. This again takes S2 and copies it into string 1. It erases anything that's there already. All right, let's dive into a program and see what it looks like in code blocks. Okay, so let's take a look at this string function example I have written here in code blocks. There's another resource, and I'll post the link to this in the description of this video, but this goes into a little bit more depth on each of the individual string functions, if that's something you're struggling with, or if it's something you want to explore a little bit more. It also dives into some of the more obscure string functions that we're not going to touch on today. So if you look at my code here, you can see I've declared 4 strings, and I've just called them S1 through 4. I've also declared some catch variables. They're going to catch my returns for string length and things like that. And you can see I made my strings have 100 characters in them. That's just to make sure that I have plenty of space. I could probably have made them 20 and still been fine, but it's just what I chose. So you can see we're taking 2 strings here. I'm scanning them in using getS, right, and not scanf, because scanf will only take the first word. As soon as it sees a space, it stops. So getS is definitely the best bet for strings. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 2 separate examples here in part 1. We're going to look at the string cat function, which is string concatenate. And what this is going to do is it's going to add string 2 to the end of string 1. And then I'll go back and I'll show you string ncat, string n concatenate, which will only take a certain number of letters from the beginning and add them to the end of string 1. But let's look at the basic one first, and then we'll get into some of these other string functions. Okay, so just build it. We're gonna run it. I'm gonna enter string 1, and let's say I just enter hello. And for my second string, because I know I want a space between those 2 words, I'm gonna enter space and then world. So when I use string cat, it's going to take that second string, which in this case is space world, and add it onto the beginning of my first string and then store all of that in string 1. So when I go down here and check the length of string 1 after I've already concatenated it, you can see it shows a length of 11 because I have these 2 5-letter words plus the space in the middle. Okay, so let's look at what happens when we use string ncat. So I'll just uncomment this and I will comment this out. Otherwise it'll do both. We'll get some weirdness. So we'll build it, we'll run it. Now in this case, because I'm taking the first 10 letters, I need a string that's like a little bit longer in order to actually show that I can only take 10 letters, because if I typed hello world, it would take all of them because it's only 5. So let's do a different string here, and I'm going to type EGR 112 and then space is awesome. And that should give me enough letters to show you how different string ncat is. So again, if I was using regular string cat, I would take the space is awesome and just add it onto the end of the 112 here, and that would all be string 1. But in this case, Concatenation for string cat using only 10 letters. If you count this string here, it's actually 11, right? You have to count that initial space as well. So when it only takes the first 10, it cuts off the E on the end. And I could make this a different number than 10, right? I can make it 2 or 4 or however many I wanted. It doesn't matter. Now that I've concatenated that, which means I add string 2 to the end of string 1, and then I check the length of string 1, it's going to take the length of all of this. So that's a total of 17 letters. Now, if I were to do just regular string cat without the N and do EGR112 is awesome, it would be 18 because it'd have that E on the end as well. So let me demo that too. So I'm going to say EGR112, and then I'm going to do space. Oops. There we go. Get my comment right. All right. So we're going to run this just with regular string cat. I'll bring this over so you can see what's happening here, right? I commented out the string and cat. So please enter string 1. We're going to use the same string, EGR112, and then a space is awesome. And now you can see when we just use the regular string cat, it adds that entire string. And if I'd have typed more, it would have added that too onto the end of the first string, stores that all in string 1. And so when we check the length of string 1, we get the total of 18. We don't have anything else cut off. Something cool that you can do actually with any string function that uses an N in the middle. So let's go back and we'll uncomment that string ncat, and we'll take this out. Something interesting that you can do with anything that has an N in the middle, so string copy, string cat, string compare, right? If you have the N in the middle, you have 3 inputs, so you're comparing only a certain number. But what happens if I don't want to compare from the beginning of my second string? What if I want to compare from the middle or from some other point? I can actually do that because these are just arrays. So instead of comparing from the beginning of each of these, and remember the name, because it's an array, is the address of the first element, I can tell it to compare or concatenate or copy from any point in the string. So let's say, for example, I want to add on just the awesome part. What I can do is say, okay, well, I have a space, and then I have I, and then I have S, and I have another space. So if I do this, take the 4th element, and we'll copy 10, and we won't have 10, that's okay. Let's see what happens if we use the exact same example. EGR112 is awesome. So let me build that, right? We shouldn't get any errors because this is just the address of the first element of string 1. So instead of the address of the first element, I'm just going from the address of the 4th element. So same example, EGR112. I've got a space, is, space. Awesome, if I can type. So now what it's done is it said, hey, we're actually only gonna copy from that 4th element on, and we'll still take 10 characters, and if you don't have 10, we'll just take all of them. So that's what's happened here. I've taken out the space, so that 1, 2, 3, 4, and then taken the rest of that string and added it on, concatenated it to EGR112. So that's something cool that you can do with any function that has that N in the middle. You can always start it from any point in the string, not just the beginning. Okay, so I'm gonna actually comment out this beginning part so that we don't have to bother with it when we start this second part of the example, but I'm going to leave it in the code that I post for you so that you can play with it all that you want. But I just don't want to have to keep entering things that aren't related to the next example I have. So I'm going to enter 2 other strings, string 3 and string 4, and I'm going to illustrate the string compare function as well as the string copy function. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this. And it gives me some warnings about unused variables because I just commented all those out. So I'm gonna ignore that, that's fine. So it's gonna ask me to enter string 3. So let's do the same example we did before. We'll start with hello and world. Okay, and so what's happening here right after I enter those two is it's comparing them. And it will say, if string 4 and string 3 are the same, y will be 0. You can think about it as if there are 0 differences, you'll get 0 out. If one of these is alphanumerically bigger than the other, this will be either a positive or negative number, depending on which string is alphanumerically bigger. What you really have to pay attention to is if they're 0, because if they're 0, that means they're the same. If they're not 0, they're not the same. So when I compare them, right, it tells me string 3 and string 4 are different. Okay, I was kind of expecting that. And then it prints out what string 3 and string 4 are. String 3 is hello and string 4 is world. Now what's happening on the next line? So it's done this logic here. Then I go down and I say, okay, I actually want to copy all of string 4 into string 3. Now I already have stuff in string 3, right? I typed in hello here. So what's going to happen when I try and copy string 4 into string 3? It's going to write completely over it. It's going to take everything from string 3, delete it, and then put string 4 in there. So that's what happens, right? I tell it to string copy, and then I print out after string copy, string 3 is world and string 4 is world. So that's exactly what happened. Now, I wanted to show you, instead of just comparing the whole word, we can actually compare just the first 3. Now, I know these are going to be the same. They should be because I copied one into the other. So I could do a string compare of the whole things, but I want to illustrate something else. So I'm going to do string n compare. Remember, because this is the n, we can also start at a different point in each of these strings if we wanted to. I'm going to compare the 3 first characters of string 4 and the 3 first characters of string 3. This compare works the same as the regular compare. So if there are 0 differences, z will be 0. And we can use that in our logic like I have here. So when we did that comparison, right, after we've copied them so we know that they're the same, we say, now we can compare the first part of string 3 and string 4, and we get that string 3 and string 4 are the same, which is this logic right here. Okay, so what would happen if I take this string copy out? Now we think they're going to be different. So let's just double check and make sure our program's working correctly. So I'll build that, we'll run it, and I'll use the exact same example. Hello and world. Okay, so now string 3 and string 4 are different. We print out each of them. We haven't actually done the string copy, so you can see this in the previous example was world, and now it's hello and world. And now if we're comparing just the first parts of string 3 and string 4, string 3 and string 4 are different, right? String 3 is hello and string 4 is RLD. And that says RLD because I've thrown a little peanut in here for you to look at. I'm actually showing string 4 using that special technique we used, right? Only from the second element on. Now, if I want to, I can just take that out and it'll print as normal. But if I have that, I can actually print out strings using that same technique. Now let me show you as a normal example. All right, so if you take that out, you just print string 3 and string 4, you just print out hello and world. I hope that was a nice quick review of string functions for you. Again, we talked about the 4 major types of string functions as well as some of their variations. So we talked about string compare, string length, string copy, and string concatenate. Most of those will take 2 or 3 inputs, but string length only takes 1. Again, I'm Professor Casey. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email, or you can leave a comment below and I do check them frequently. I hope you enjoyed this video on string functions. Thanks for watching and have a great day.